I'm Sarah Knight, and welcome to It's Got Pockets, where just like finding the surprise pockets in your favourite trousers, I'm bringing you perfect pockets of joy and realness. Every week, I'm having unfiltered conversations with women who crack the feck on, even when life gets proper lifey. Women with experience, expertise and wisdom. Because sometimes the best stories start in the middle. Women who've been there, done that, and they're still figuring it out. Join me for real talk, useful tactics, and all the swears in between that make your life and business feel that bit more manageable. Hello and welcome back to It's Got Pockets. Today, we're talking about llamas. I mean, there's always a different way for me to introduce the podcast. And sometimes I think, am I going to get a bit stuck of how I'm going to introduce all my guests? And I've never been able to introduce my guest talking about why you put a bow tie on a llama. Today's guest is the marvellous Celia Gaze, who is a founder, the chair of a charity called One Woman at a Time. You are the founder of a business called the Wellbeing Farm. And what I loved about when we started talking and when I was looking at your stories, a couple of things, is the fact that at the moment you're going through a little bit of a summer of soul searching, which I need to find out a little bit more about. And also the fact that you never set out to become a founder. So I want to talk about those plot twist moments as well. Welcome, Celia, to It's Got Pockets.
Oh, welcome, Sarah. Very excited for our chat this morning. I can tell it's going to go on in all directions because of our personalities.
Yes, there's never one solid format that quite works. And even if I think I've got a format, then it goes off into a completely different direction. So I've just learned that we just go for it. Yeah. But let's start with your book is titled Why Put a Bow Tie on a Llama? So the first obvious question is, why the blinking heck would you put a bow tie on a llama? And why have you got a llama in Bolton?
Oh my goodness, what a story. Well, it goes back to when I was working in the NHS and I experienced burnout while in the NHS. Now, at that point, nobody ever kind of goes and sets out to be an experienced burnout. Let's be honest. There's usually a sort of gradual thing around stress, and you're not managing the stress properly, and it gets worse, and then it eventually leads to burnout. Now, the point with me is, I was almost like, what actually is stress? How on earth has I landed up here in burnout from going to the doctors and the doctor saying to me, you've got to take got to take some time out. And I said, what, a couple of days? And he said, no, at least 2 weeks. And I was like, why on earth have I, and how did I end up in this position? And what were all the factors that led me to get to that position? So I became obsessed with stress while stressed. Couldn't just be stressed. I had to, when you're suddenly diagnosed with something that you want to learn all about it, so I was Googling away, kind of everything on stress, watching the videos and everything, going, what on earth, how did I not know all this? Then all about burnout. And then I had to do, of course, while stressed, a qualification in stress and a qualification in organizational stress led me to do a piece of coursework on basically design a facility to minimize stress. How would a business be created to purposely minimize stress? That was almost the scope of the coursework. So I ended up kind of creating this fictitious piece of coursework, handed it in, and the man went, hang on, we asked for 1,000 words or whatever. And he goes, you give me about 10,000 words and a mood board and a business case. I said, I need to create this business. I absolutely have fallen in love with this project. I feel I could create this project. The project was around the farm and how I would transform this farm into this special place all around managing your well-being. And at the time I was lucky because the NHS came out with this framework called the 5 Ways to Wellbeing. Nobody was really doing wellbeing at this point. This was kind of back in 2012. And nobody was really talking about well-being. So I said, well, I think well-being is going to be massive. So I'm going to call my business the Wellbeing Farm. And I think Wellbeing Farms are going to go everywhere. So I'm going to call it the Wellbeing Farm. So I could be like the first Wellbeing Farm. So I ended up in quite a journey. The book is all about what I did and how I went from leaving the NHS to setting up this farm. Now, the point of the llamas, first of all, is when I was creating this farm, I'd sorted out the building, but there was all these additional farm buildings at the time. The farm that I had had a livery yard with horses. I'm not a particular massive horse fan. All I knew is horses took a lot of work, and I didn't want an animal that would actually take a lot of work. My criteria is because I had to use the stables. I had to use something to in them. So my criteria was not take a lot of work, be able to survive winters in Bolton, and basic day to day sort of just being able to just you didn't have to weren't going to cost you a fortune, I suppose. So when I was doing my course, I came out with the ways of de-stressing, and in my research the concept of llama trekking came up, and I was like, what the hell? You go and walk a llama and it de-stresses you. And I was like, that is completely bonkers, but I'll go and give it a go. So I kind of took my partner and I down to Northampton. There was no other place at that point. And we ended up there literally walking a llama. And I fell in love with these animals. I absolutely adored these animals. They've got such like out of proportion necks, but amazing eyes. They look like Cleopatra makeup eyes if you look at the eyes of them. And they were so inquisitive and so so much personality that I thought I'm going to have to get these llamas. So obviously I went from never really met a llama to bringing them up to Bolton. And as you said, when I bought them up, first of all the farmers were like going, what the hell? I mean, what do you do with this animal? Can you eat it? Can you use its wool? I was like, no. Well, what on earth do you do? So from a farming perspective, from a family of very traditional farmers, they were like, are you completely mad getting these animals? Is it absolutely ridiculous? So I ended up with the animals and the farm and everything. And just so where the bow tie comes in, so there's a long story between this and the moment, but I was nearly bankrupt in 2015, and I thought this business is going disastrous. This is really, oh my God, it's awful. And I had this crazy idea. I'd been helping my mum declutter her wardrobes, and she'd come across this big bag of bow ties that my dad had left, that he was a concert pianist, so he used to wear these bow ties all the time. She said, of all the things, what am I going to do with these? And I went, in a literally split second, look, just give them to me, I'll take them back with me, and I'm going to go and put them on a llama. So she sort of looked at me and I went, yeah, well, I think they might be all right. So I went back, put the bow tie on a llama in January, just after Christmas, and well, I didn't put it on. Somebody else put it on for me. I wasn't going to risk it. And took a photo and put it on Facebook, and everybody went mad. The social media almost blew up, and everyone wanted to know about these bow tie wearing llamas. And our wedding bookings literally went from 2 weddings to 15 to 43 to 68. That tiny little simple thing just erupted almost my business, and it just was fantastic after that moment, because we were no longer just another venue. We were a venue that had bow tie wearing llamas. We stood out from the competition. We had a really strong brand, and the rest is history. And it's just that small little thing has just basically become almost the look and the main thing about our brand. Everybody knows us for the bow tie wearing llamas more than anything else.
Going back to everything you've said, it's all the small things, isn't it, that count? We all think when we're growing up in business, when we're moving through business, it's the big things that we think we've got to look out for. And actually, going back to what you were saying about burnout, it's the small things, isn't it? You were talking about becoming obsessed with stress. And of course, as a woman, we have to then research the stress, get qualified in stress, as if the qualification isn't enough. Let's get a qualification too. But you talked about it was a gradual thing that happened. There was no one thing to identify it. It was just all of a sudden, it was like, shit, this is bad.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was just, kind of you start by not sleeping properly. That then becomes this obsession with getting as much work as you can get done. It didn't help because I'd also had a baby, and I'd gone back to work probably too early, because I'd been called back during maternity leave to say, would you like to come and do this project? The project was a turnaround director, to save a lot of money in the NHS. It was a challenging role. And, when someone calls you up to do a job, you almost feel like a bit of a knight in shining armor. You feel like, oh my goodness, you feel that the burden is on you to do this and deliver this project. And I've always been really good at projects, and I've always been really good at delivering, which is probably why they called me up in the first place. And almost to go in and have something not work, because obviously, you know, a lot of these things are systematic, they're to do with the culture, and things have to get worse before they get better. So with a lot of these things, you have to spend on putting the systems right and the processes right and everything else before you start tackling the sort of reduction in money. You can't just go cut out this and cut out that and cut out, and all of a sudden you've saved millions of pounds. It doesn't work like that. But to be honest, it wasn't turning around as quickly as I wanted, and I was taking it very personally, and I was getting all worked up about it. And I remember driving to work one day, and I honestly I was holding the steering wheel and getting these chest pains, and I was like, oh my goodness, I'm not even 40 and I'm having a heart attack. Which is what prompted me to go to the GP, to be honest. And then when I got there, it was a board meeting. I was literally almost crying. And I wasn't a person that used to cry all the time. I was never sort of on a board of, you know, I was on the board of directors and sitting there crying in a meeting. It was just awful. I was just so embarrassed that, to be quite honest, when that happened and you walk out of a board meeting, and these board meetings are often public, you know, I kind of didn't want to go back. I was too embarrassed, to be honest, to go back. But also, it was only when a nurse said to me at the time, have you been to see the doctor about stress? And I never even thought about real stress. You don't know about, nobody ever. At school, you never taught about stress. You never sort of taught about the symptoms of stress and what helps stress and what manages it. And to be quite honest, at that time, if you had stress, I remember a time where you used to recruit, and before you recruited, you got almost the medical records of that person. So if that person had things like stress and stuff, you wouldn't touch them, because you'd think, oh, they're going to be a problem. I'm going to be coming off with stress all the time. I'm going to have to pay for it. So you wouldn't actually employ them. So there was a lot of times where I mean, I'd never really gone with stress before that job, but to be quite honest, it almost prevented you from going to the doctor to discuss any of these conditions, because you almost thought that actually, if I went to the doctor, admitted I was stressed, they put stress on my medical record, that would be the end of my career. And it's bad enough as a woman trying to get your career going, never mind some sort of label that stops you progressing any further. So to be quite honest, it was almost like a last resort that I thought, I'm going to have to tackle this, to go to the doctor. And I'm just so grateful now that those rules kind of went out the window. The whole stigma about stress, you know, came out with it was far less stigmatized. I mean, when I was talking openly about stress, which was sort of 14 years ago, you'd have thought I would have had some sort of condition, you know, sort of some, that if you're going to catch it from me, the way people were like, do you have to talk so openly about your stress? Do you have to talk so openly about mental health? And it was only when people like sort of Prince Harry, bless him, and people like that, and Ruby Wax and people like that, who had originally started talking about these conditions, and it all became the norm to be able to be. And then it became quite trendy to say you were stressed or had mental health issues or whatever, or everybody seems to have ADHD or some element of it is nowadays, or neurodivergent. So it's kind of like, you know, it came from all that sort of time, really.
Yeah, and it's hard, isn't it? Because, and I think as a woman in business as well, you often wear it as a badge of honor. It becomes like a little bit like martyrdom. Well, I can do this and I can do a bit more, and let me show you how much more I can do. And then the flip side of that is, like you say, because you're delivering, because you're turning projects around, because when people need something doing, you're the person they call, then you don't want to let them down, which then adds into it. And then you're adding in the martyrdom, and then you're adding in the, yeah, well, I've got to do it. It's me. It's on me to hold the sky up. You know, the last thing you're thinking about is actually, what do I need to do to serve myself? What do I do to make it better? And I, you know, growing up in business, the whole thing we were taught was, well, you need to work harder and you need to play harder. You need to just do it all.
Yeah, I mean, and that was very much a household that I came from. I was one of 6 kids. You had to almost fight to be herd in some respects. It was always very much on, if you do really well, maybe you'll be you noticed amongst everybody else. Do you know what I mean? And this whole sort of driving yourself, and I suppose as well, I think I've always been kind of quite driven to do things, to almost stand on my own 2 feet and things like that. So I suppose, you do carry on, and you keep going and going until something suddenly prevents you from doing it. But also for me as well, I mean, I absolutely love working in the NHS. I loved it. It was so exciting, the things you were doing, the projects you got involved with, the scope. But also, at the other hand, there was a tremendous amount of bureaucracy. And I appreciate that it was a public sector organisation and they have to be checks and balances, 100%. But you had an idea and you knew it was going to make a difference. You got loads of clinicians behind you. You knew this was going to happen, but you had to write it in a paper. Fair enough. But then you had to take it to a committee. Okay, fair enough. But then that committee would run out of time and go, oh, sorry, we can't discuss your thing. You'll have to wait another month. And that committee only sort of almost met once a month. And I was like, this is ridiculous. There was so much you could have done so much more and you were not able to do it. So I suppose when I got the farm and I suddenly had this, oh my goodness, I've got an idea and I'm my own boss. I could implement it by lunchtime. I literally went crazy. It was almost like 14 years of being in the NHS, of all these almost bureaucracy and challenges. I was almost like, I haven't got any more of that anymore. I could just deliver and implement and just drive it forward. And I literally just did go mad of that. I almost felt like I've been let loose and being my own boss. I could just get on with it. And so that's probably why I was able to do as much as I did, to be honest.
Yeah, having that freedom to suddenly be in control of what you do next without having to put it through 70 bazillion layers of what might work and what might work might not work is freeing, isn't it?
Yeah, very much so.
When you talk about that and you talk about being driven, because I think that's quite a theme of a lot of the women that I talk to, is that underneath it all, we're incredibly driven. And we don't acknowledge that often because we're too busy cracking on with all the shit that we've got to deal with. And then, a lot of the stuff that I talk about is something happens, there's some sort of plot twist, whether it's, a crisis issue from illness, a redundancy, or suddenly having this epiphany of, I am not doing this like this anymore. It's then when we realize our drive and ambition and potential, really, because we've spent so long just going, okay, this is what I do next, and this is what I do next, and this is what I do next, and this is what I do next. But then suddenly seeing it, did you find it scary?
What, to just
have that freedom and have that potential and have that space to go, oh, this is on me as well?
Well, yeah, I mean, and at the time, it was very exciting at the time because first I'd left the NHS. I put this business case together, based, on the back of having gone and done that course, and I got this plan. So the plan was then turned into a proper business case. I had to then go and get funding and everything. Then I had to transform the farm from this almost neglected farm to obviously something fit enough to be able to hold corporate companies and weddings.
So did you buy the farm as part of the business?
Yeah, so the farm was my partner's farm. So what happened is I was off with stress and I was filling my time because I'd always been somebody who was very driven, very ambitious. And then just to go off and this is great for some people, but not for others. For me, just to look after a baby wasn't enough. I mean, I loved work. I loved being busy. I've lately discovered I got ADHD, which kind of made it all sense now. That I had somebody who had to just do stuff all the time. Very, very hard to sit still. Very kind of almost had to be driven and doing something the whole time. So for me, just to have a baby wasn't enough. So with that baby, I kept taking the baby to all different places, kind of looking at different models. That baby became almost towing with me and going to all the things because I had this idea of a business. So I literally then thought, I'm going to go and look at other places who've done something similar with farms. I literally went over to about 180 blooming farms from literally Cornwall to Scotland with the baby, going all over the place, just to create this business plan, to create all of this thing. And at the beginning, I was going to do it like a venue that held different courses and things like this. So I was on a gift wrapping course of all things, and I was.
I love how many courses you've been on.
Oh my God, I've done like an A to Z of courses. It's just ridiculous. I think I've done over 100 courses, ridiculous amount. And I'm learning how to wrap this football, as you do. And these two women were talking about what they were doing from from the house, and I was going. The football almost rolled off the stand because I was listening so much, trying to concentrate on what they were doing rather than the football. And they were sort of saying how they were sort of what people were coming that weekend, what they were learning, the gift wrapping to be able to teach it from the house. They were discussing the menu and what they were going to teach, and I was like, oh my goodness, I've loved doing courses. That's what I need to do. So I've always loved. So it was literally, I phoned my partner Stephen on the way home and went, oh my goodness, I've had a fantastic idea. I could transform your farm to something. And this is while driving home in the car, on the car, phone thing. And he was like, right, okay, yeah. Do you know what? Oh my goodness, I've got such good ideas for your farm. In fact, would you let me do something like a plan to transform your farm? This is over the phone. He goes, yeah, that's fine. I went, all right, okay, fine. That was the end. I bet he now regrets that conversation.
Well, he probably can't remember the conversation. He's probably like, how did this happen?
Exactly. So the farm was, it was there in principle, but it was just a really rundown, like it's the sort of farm that you would just drive past and go, wouldn't you think they'd sort that farm out? Do you know what I mean? And the only good thing about the farm was it had lovely views, and that was about it. So at that point, so kind of,
I grew up in Bury and went to school in Bolton. And so I need to know whereabouts in Bolton it is.
Yeah, Edgeworth.
Oh, yeah, stunning. Yeah. Okay, right, okay, yeah.
So around there. So you know where the ice cream shop was? Just half a mile from there.
So near the Strawberry Duck and around there.
Yeah, but it's the other side, going towards the motorway.
Right.
So it's obviously going higher up. So when you look out, if I was as I was at the farm looking over, I'd be able to see on a clear day as far as sort of Fiddler's Ferry, kind of way over to Northwell. You can see loads from there's 800 feet above sea level. You can see loads.
Wow. And for anyone listening to this who's not from the north or not from the northwest, they'll be like, what are you talking about? But it's an absolutely stunning part of the world. And it's one of those things that when we talk about stress and well-being, our environment is so important. If you look at any of the psychological method and, from Maslow's hierarchy of needs right the way through to Dilt's logical levels, your environment is such a big part of it, and who you surround yourself with, but where you surround yourself with. And I feel that a lot of that whole nature thing has almost become a little bit, it's one of those words that we overuse, get out in nature. When I'm talking to teams or I'm talking to individuals, I'm like, open your front door and look up. That's going to help you. And it's almost become one of those things that we pat down and pat away. But the transformation, last week I went down south and I was with the in-laws for 4 or 5 days, and they live in a beautiful part of West Sussex. And just waking up and their view, which is different to my view, just gave me different perspective and then helped all the brain cells get back in order again.
Yeah, 100%. It is so important. I mean, I almost can't function without like a daily walk and in nature first thing. You need to, even if it's just 5-10 minutes, but you need to do it for your own. And this is all part of, you learn all this as you go along. And, this is why probably have a more busier job running a business, but actually you learn all the things that you do to stop stress and to stop burnout and things like that.
So you've been through burnout, because I think, again, burnout can be a really overused term, and then say, there's creaking, and then there's burnout as well, isn't there? But I think
100%.
the thing that I've witnessed from a lot of women in my world, again, is that it happens so gradually and it's such a small thing that you almost end up with the grip in the steering wheel and, oh shit, am I having a heart attack, before you do something about it. In your journey afterwards, what do you do now to guard against it? Do you have you talked about checks and balances in business. Do you have checks and balances in yourself now that you really have some hard boundaries around?
Oh yeah, very much so. And I'll be honest, I learned, I think there's different degrees of burnout. I think burnout is when you go to the doctor and it is so severe that they almost wanted to offer you medication and offer you a course of counselling, that degree. And then there's degrees of just feeling quite frazzled and overwhelmed and stuff. And people put that on a sort of burnout scale. But I think the true burnout is when you are really almost debilitated through the work and you can't think from the trees, and it's affecting your home life and your relationships and everything else to sort of that degree. I mean, when I was sort of diagnosed with this ADHD, I kind of now realize that more people have a burnout and the symptoms is because of this ADHD. And again, I wish I'd known that, because I'd have almost looked at my whole work very differently, if I'd have known I'd had that condition. But never mind, we are where we are. So now it's very important to put kind of boundaries. I have a really, really strong morning routine. I still do that 5 a.m. thing. I mean, I do love that. I've always been somebody who gets up early, but it's more because I love the peacefulness of it all. And I love the fact that now previously I used to be up at 5 or 4 o'clock even, and I'd be on emails and doing work and all sorts. I now no longer do that whatsoever. I literally do 5 a.m. till about 7 is just for me. And I do my reading and listening to sort of personal development stuff and journaling and all that kind of meditation and things. That is a really, really must do for me. And then I go and walk the dog. So I have been my sort of half an hour to an hour. I'm doing a 1,000,000 step challenge thing at the moment. So I'm almost an hour walking the dog each morning, which is my nature fix. I'm very lucky to be surrounded by kind of either woodland or farm or whatever, countryside. And then I will then only start work at 9:30. And I'm very clear that I've been following a lot of work by Robin Sharma and his whole sort of the monk who lost his Ferrari or whatever, I can't remember the names, but that and his whole thing around almost that, at the end of the day, you can work and work and work, but actually if you've got nothing to show for it at the end, you might be wealthy, but if you haven't got your health, you haven't got relationships, you haven't got your friends, you haven't got anything, what's the point of it all? And so I've been following like mad all his processes, all his plans, their ways of working, how he does the productivity, the 5 essentials a day, mapping out your week, making sure you've got lots of free time in there, being really strict as to what goes into your time diary. I am so lucky. I did a lot of work to get the right team in place. I'm so lucky that I now only need to go to the farm once a week. I literally go on a Wednesday, which is my team day, meet with the managers, all of a team meeting, look at any issues. But I have a really amazing exec assistant as well who handles a lot and is almost like a filter to. I mean, I've put a permanent out of office on my emails and just said, look, I'm taking some time out. I'm and I'm hoping that this is like a permanent thing that I do. And I'm now really and do you know what? Since taking this time out, which has started at the beginning of July, I've literally got more done in terms of big projects and creativity and driven the farm in terms of more projects than I have ever done before. And I've also, my staff feel less overwhelmed because I used to be there on the emails, but right, and now I've got this, and this idea, and this idea. And I'd be driving them mad, I'll be honest with you, because it was just at the beginning of this year. And I said, I've got so many ideas for this farm. I'm going to put them in a document. I said, I know you don't want them all the week, so I'm going to put them in a document. That document got to something like 78 pages it was ridiculous. And I look back and I'm like, God, and they all said to me the other day, we feel so much less. We're all getting on with it. Every wedding and a corporate event has been delivered. There's been massive ones that I've not even been there for. I look on the social media and I'm as surprised as anybody else at what's going on. I haven't got a clue. And I feel like and I'm there driving some other bigger projects, but which I'm just getting on with now, and they're not sort of being really involved. And there is this thing about having this distance, creating, getting the right team in the first place and really helping them, supporting them, but then letting them get on with it and you stepping back and really focusing on the things that you actually need to focus on. And I said to them the other day, I used to feel really guilty for not being with you there every day. I felt guilty from almost sometimes working from home. I felt like I needed to be at the farm to almost be showing you that I'm supporting you all the time, that I'm there in almost physical presence meant I'm supporting you. And they were like, well, this is so I said, I felt guilty for not working all the time. I felt guilty for having rests. And they were like, well, this is just absolutely ridiculous. I said, because, and it came from them to say, why on earth would you feel like that? But it's this badge of almost that you were saying before, this busyness, this honor, this having to do it all and to seem to be doing it all and to do it, and I don't know where it all sort of comes from, but it is inherent in so many women that we all wear this badge of busyness to, in some respects, almost to prove ourselves.
Yeah.
And you end up like, who are you proving yourself to?
Yeah.
Kind of who, because my partner is really laid back. He wouldn't get mine probably if I did no work or whatever. He also doesn't like the kind of frazzled and working all the time, stressed version of me at all, and neither probably does my son or anybody else. And it's like, well, why are you doing it? Farm's got to the position where I don't need to work 12 hours a day every single day. It doesn't need it. It doesn't need me driving all these flipping projects and ideas and stuff. So the team are asking for it. And it's like, well, why am I doing it? So I decided, at the beginning of this to say, actually, I'm just going to take some time out and see what happens. Let's just take time for myself. And you know what? By me declaring this to almost my team and to the rest of the world, I've almost like that let the sort of principle of Mel Robbins talks about. It's almost that I've almost gone, I'm doing this, everybody, and now I will no longer feel guilty for enjoying myself. I won't no longer feel guilty for having 2 hours of personal development in the mornings because that's what I want to do and that's my time. I won't feel guilty for not being at that farm every single day helping you all. I'm not going to feel guilty of doing the projects that I want to do, like a TEDx that I've got booked in for September. I'm working on things that about my visibility. I won't feel guilty for spending some money on getting some nice images of me done. I won't feel guilty of creating my website, when up until this point. And, I've been doing this farm for nearly 12 and a half years, and it's all been about the farm. I have worked like a Trojan on creating a business that can now run without me. But then when it can do that, you have this massive sense of guilt, whereas you've been in this drive, all the hours, getting a business set up, doing all of this. And then suddenly the business runs really well. And you're like, well, what's my role? You always feel like a little bit like, oh my goodness, what do I do now with my life? Because the farm doesn't need me. And because you work so much, I suppose you're like, well, where's the rest of my life? And you realize actually the rest of your life kind of disappeared when you started working all the hours that you used to do. So you then have to almost start again in going, okay, what is the rest of my life going to look like outside of work? And this is, I suppose, where I am now, that I literally filled this sort of little journal thing with all the things that I've always wanted to do, from tiny little things like buying flowers every day to massive things like booking a month off to go to Costa Rica type thing. And you know what? I'm systematically this summer working through the little book. So I've had days when I've just taken myself to and maybe an art gallery that I've never visited. I've taken myself off for lunch to a place that I've never visited. And I'm not doing it with anyone else, because I sometimes feel that if I was to have someone else doing it with me, first it's always the cord. I mean, it's not like I haven't got any friends, but sometimes first of all, it's the trying to get the date when you both can make it. Then when you get there, it's like, I want to do these things, and sometimes they cost quite a lot of money, and I wouldn't want the other person to think, well, I can't afford it, or I can't do these. Do you know what I mean? And also, I think every day I've been reading the books of Robin Sharma. I've literally got through 3 of them in this month, literally. And he always says that there's a trait of millionaires and billionaires, kind of very, very successful people. And that's it. They get up early and they spend a lot of time on their own. And I have no issues around being on my own. In fact, I love my own company. And sometimes I feel that's really good for me, because if I go up to the farm and if I'm on at the farm, I'm almost like, there's no alone time. Everybody wants a piece of you. Everybody wants to chat to you. And my diary used to be, honestly, I can't tell, I'd have like 8 meetings in a day, kind of. And this switching off now and this having this freedom to just, I look at my diary and I've got like 1 or 2 things in it. I'm like, oh my goodness, I've got so much space in my diary. Yet at the same time, the business hasn't folded under because I've not been there. That is actually probably growing because I'm focusing on the right things. And I myself feel so much happier and less stressed. And my work-life balance is probably now getting to the norms, whereas before it used to be so out of balance.
Let me just take you back to something I said. I think that one of the things that is really interesting about what you said, well, there's about a billion things, but how we move from women to proving our worth to owning our worth, which is something I talk about all the time. And then you said I had to declare it, and you had to declare it to the world, and you had to declare it to your team. And one of the things that really struck me was, actually, I feel what you were doing was declaring it to yourself and giving
100%.
yourself permission to do that. And that's where we have to start, isn't it? When we're going, like the women that are coming into my Found Her Fire community, it's that declaration of going, actually, this is about me now, whether it's leaving corporate and set up in the business, whether it's, finding that space for yourself to gift yourself, whether it's 2 hours in the morning, whether it's 2 hours in the evening, what suits you as an individual. But at some point, you have to declare it to yourself, don't you?
Yeah, and you are absolutely right that by me almost declaring it to everybody else, I also said that to myself, and it gave myself permission. And it was almost that removing that badge of guilt, that by declaring it out there, I almost lifted the badge.
Yeah. And that it is the starting point, I think, to gift ourselves and to other women in our world, because actually we have to give ourselves permission to go, I'm declaring it. I love the fact it's a declaration. And, let's face it, you needed to gift that time to the business, to grow the business, to build the business. You mentioned about nearly going through bankruptcy right the way through to building a successful business. That always on approach is what made you successful. But then at the same time, when you then go around and you go, okay, where's my legacy and where's the trace that I want to leave? It's never just about the business, is it?
No, very much so. And I mean, I think that's where you get to a point in running a business where the business runs, okay without you. And then that's the bit where you start going, okay, I'm now going to shift my attention to my sort of legacy piece, or what I want to do with my life and what I want to be known for, as opposed to just the business.
Yeah, I love that. What shifting my attention and what do I want to be known for? Because we don't give ourselves any time to think about that, because there's all this stuff going on. And one of the things that I love about when you talk about your journey from burnout into something else, you talk about, frankly, you need to create more joy. And we don't talk about that enough either, do we?
No, and that the whole little book that I talked about before was almost like a little book of joy. All the things that I'd always wanted to do, the things that bring me happiness, the things that I wanted to explore and discover and find, and that is exactly what I'm doing now. And I sometimes think when you go, God, everything's really working at the moment, I'm really sort of grateful for everything, and I'm loving my life. It's all because I'm doing all the things that is in the book of joy, so and then you think, oh right, well, what a surprise. But I mean, but that also boils me down to, like, part of the journey, and obviously I did the whole B Corp project and everything like this, and it was, the B Corp had a big element of supporting charities and communities and what have you. And I wanted to find a charity that if I gave £500, it wouldn't be swamped with spending it on overheads and chief exec salaries and things like that, that my £500 would reach the people the charity was intended to help. And I looked really hard to find the right charity. I've got to be honest, because I've given money before and sometimes not even got a thank you for different things. Anyway, to cut the long story short, found this charity purely by accident. It was quite a weird way I found this charity. I'm not going to go so much into charity, but the reason why, what happened is I had to go to Africa for nearly a month to see if the charity was what it said on the tin, because I thought, well, if I'm going to put the reputation of the farm towards a charity, I don't want the charity to be almost not doing, to do that whole due diligence for the charity just as much as for my own self. So it's that time to think. And when I went to Africa, I literally had all my luggage, so the 30 odd, I think it was 30 kilos because we bought extra, was devoted to donations for the girls that we were there to help in Africa. So you could have One Woman at a Time. They help girls who are at risk of FGM, and basically they educate them and they put them in boarding, and then when the girls are older, they can make the choice as to whether they would like to be cut or not from female genital mutilation. Most of the time they obviously don't get cut because they realize the risks, they realize what it means, and to be honest, most of them go on to have careers. So as opposed to most of the girls being cut at age 11, most of the girls at age 16 are on the path to doing nurses or education or entrepreneurship or whatever. So it's almost eradicating FGM out of that area, because 120 girls have now been prevented from being cut and gone to do different things. And then they see other people going, what, you mean you didn't get cut? You don't have to be cut. And the conversations become normalized around that, rather than you must be cut. It's you've got a choice. So for me, I couldn't think of anything worse as a woman over there, age 11, with no choices whatsoever. You're either cut or you marry a man aged 75 who's already got 3 underwives. Do you know what I mean? So it's a horrendous situation, horrendous. So I love the fact that it allowed me to go to Africa and to experience the conditions, and you come back with a massive sense of gratitude. But I'm there. I couldn't take anything with me. There was no internet, there was no electricity, there was no Wi-Fi, the lot. So I thought, well, let's take a book. I had a choice of very, very limited because I had no luggage. So I took a book called Find Your Purpose. Now, I didn't realize at the time that this book, it was a book, Find Your Purpose, and a corresponding journal. But you had to answer all the questions from read the book, answer the questions. I thought, well, that'd be nice. It'd give me something to do while I'm in Africa, and I come back with finding my purpose. I thought, this is fantastic. It wasn't only one night too. So the first night was all chatting and all obviously excited being in Africa and chatting to everybody. And then I had a bit of time and I opened the book and I realized that Find Your Purpose was all about finding God. I was, flipping it. I've never been a particular religious person. I did the whole confirmation stuff when I was little, but I'm not a church goer. I've never really done anything like that. So I was like, oh my flipping it. Of all the books I could have bought, I've now got this thing to do. So what do I do? Just ditch the journal and ditch it? Or do I start having a look at this thing? So I decided to go, sod it. I'm just going to work through the exercises and work through. Some of it was a bit, but some of it was actually quite relevant. So I get through the entire book and I literally had a whole book full of all my thinking, thoughts behind it. And it led me to the creation of what you just said before. We never have time to think. We end up on a treadmill, and wherever we end up, sometimes we don't end up in the place where we thought we wanted to end up. So I've ended up creating a concept called Conscious Day, which is a national awareness day. And I'm actually making it into a worldwide awareness day because I got it proclaimed in America, and then thought, well, why stop with just UK?
Yeah,
as you do.
Let's take it global.
Exactly. So it's going to become that. So the idea is on March the 13th every year, and it was held in March to coincide with B Corp month, but also at the same time it was the only day where I looked at all these awareness days, and actually there was nothing on March the 13th, or not of any major thing. It's hard to find a gap in the market on these awareness days. And so the concept of a conscious day is a day where you just stop and you stop to plan and you think about where your life has ended up at that point in time on every single year. So you've got your New Year's resolutions out of the way. Sometimes they haven't worked, and by March, they're all forgotten about it. And it's almost like you, as an individual, you could take some time out to plan for your life and plan your day and plan where you're going to end up. But also as a community, you could plan. As a business, you could have a strategy day. And as a family, you could sit and all plan together and have one day where you all kind of think about where you're heading and where you want to be in life, and creating that sort of space, because it is the lack of space and the lack of thought. And then it then got me right through to the concept of consciousness in the context of celebrations, where I've seen so many people, like weddings and funerals and even events, where I've seen some brides who've almost been dragged to have a wedding that they wanted by their parents, and it wasn't the wedding that they actually wanted. I've been to funeral when I was in Peru. I witnessed this funeral of everybody celebrating and dancing around the gravestones, and colour and processions, and everyone having meals on the gravestone even. And I was like, blimey, in England, you go to a graveyard and you're almost thinking, oh, I'm going to get attacked any minute because they're so lowly and dismal and neglected. And similarly, you go to a funeral, it's all about everyone's wearing black and somber. There's no music, there's no celebration of the person who died. It's all quiet, hushed conversations and no real kind of real celebration. So and so we decided when I got back was to almost create a conscious celebration as a concept of the farm, where you really understand what, say, a couple want, or really understand what a person wants out of their event, whether it's a corporate event or whatever. And really it almost takes personalization to a real nth degree, because whatever that person wants, we'll work with them to create it out of the farm. We'll create vibrant celebration of life that's about music and partying and having color and vibrant food, and all the food that that person used to love, you can be served at the funeral, at their celebration of life. Similarly, and that works throughout weddings, corporate events, the lot. So go are the standard menus, gone are the sort of, you still got to price things, but people can have that flexibility and that sort of whole looking at the individual, what they want, and then personalizing it all to them.
And the thing I love about that is, and again, it's something that I wang on about all the time. It's about being intentional. We're not intentional enough with what we want, whether it's being intentional about what our peace looks like, being intentional about what our joy looks like, fucking working out what our joy looks like, what makes you feel good. I think as well, women, again, we forget, we're in our careers, we're in our serving others, we're holding the sky up, we're wearing our badges of honor, we're proving our worth. And it's like, actually, what makes me feel good? What do I do for myself? And that's so powerful when we give ourselves the permission, the declaration to go, right, okay, what is it that I like? And so many of my friends, my colleagues, the women in my community, they're like, sure, I actually fucking know the answer to that question.
Exactly. And that was the point about me. Honestly, the first part of this month was actually doing all this work to go, what actually do I want to do anymore? What do I do with my time now I've got this thing? What is on my bucket list of what things that I love to experience and do? And what, even down to what colours should I be wearing every day? Why is my wardrobe full of black clothes trying to hide myself and just get on with the day? Honestly, I've gone mad on Vinted this month. Completely changed my entire wardrobe and all that.
I love that.
Even down to colour makes you feel better, and all these elements, and how different you feel from wearing black top to a coloured top, and all this. Honestly, all these things just make the little things, but they do make a massive difference. And it's things that we never, ever take time to think about.
Yeah, and it is that. I need to introduce you to Abby Booth, who was one of my podcast guests, who has a company called Stories with Clothes, and she talks about the power of colour in our lives, and has inspired me to. I'm wearing pink today, because I was the girl that wore black, and I do like black, but she was saying that it walks people off and that. And it's really interesting when you start just going, do you know what? What do I want to do now? But we could talk about this all day. Really conscious about time. So I think we're going to have to come back and have a conscious podcast, an intentional podcast around around our conscious day. So the final question that I always ask all my guests, which can't wait to hear yours, because we've talked about so much. We've talked about how we give ourselves permission, how you do it for yourself and you don't invite anyone else in. I love that, in the fact that actually this is just about you, because the minute you invite anyone else in, it becomes about them.
100%, yeah.
Yeah, how we're intentional with it, how we're conscious with it. What are the checks and balances that we have with ourselves? So, Celia, what is your 6-word memoir?
So my 6-word memoir would be burnout, bow ties on llamas, chose conscious.
Oh, I love it. And that's it. Yeah. Blimey, you've done what Ernest Hemingway did with his original 6-word story, is you've got your story in there in 6 words. Boom, winning.
Yeah, that's kind of what it was the 6 words that would sum up where I am at the moment. And then, so my time now is focusing on my legacy project, which is a conscious stuff rather than birth.
I love it. And that is that also understanding, which it's hard to do at the time because we need to give ourselves the recovery to move forward. I hate it when people talk about, it's one of my massive bugbears, and people say, come in and do some resilience training in the workplace. And I'm going, yeah, what about the recovery piece and the power of the pause? Actually, the best training I could give is to just sit in a room quietly with people for a day whilst they just let their thoughts sort out. But often it's the plot twists that gift us something, but we have to allow the space to realize that actually without the burnout, you wouldn't be where you are now. Putting all your effort and your time into creating the Wellbeing Farm for the space it is, to dedicating your time to one woman at a time, you wouldn't be now in this position where you can go, right, okay, what about me? What about me? Yeah. What's next?
It's totally right. And sometimes I think, God, is this a bit selfish? But actually, I'm like, no, because to be honest, that sometimes you have to kind of almost pull back to grow faster. And some of the things that aren't quite right, you have to fix.
Yeah.
And so this is my period over the next, and I've given myself 6 months, because sometimes you go, oh God, and I think, 6 months is a lovely period. It was going to be 2.5 months, but now I'm halfway through it and I'm like, I haven't got enough time. I need till the end of the year to sort it. And no one seems to be bothered that I'm doing this. My partner doesn't mind. My family don't mind. My staff don't mind. So I'm like, well, that's it. I'm just carrying on now. 6 months. It might even end up to semi-retirement,
I love it. Because the thing is, once you declare it and you say, here's my boundaries, everyone goes, oh, okay then, that's fine. I love it.
Yeah, it's that perception that you think everybody's going to have an effect on it, but it's not. It's only your perception. It's nobody else's.
I love it. And thank you so much for being so honest and to talking us through, because hopefully anyone's listening, they're now going, right, okay, what the actual is my declaration to myself to give myself permission to create more joy.
And you need to create your little book of joy, because I my little book of joy, I'm carrying it every single place with me. And every time I have an idea that I think, oh, that'd be nice, it goes in that little book of joy. And you're not going to be able to do it all in, a month, but you have to keep ticking things up. At least just do one thing a week, because you then have a joy day. And, and I'm still doing work. It's not like I've switched off. But you know what? I love that I now have these things that is a joy for me, and all the things. And then people go, oh, Wendell, you look really happy at the moment, because I'm doing all the things that are bringing me joy. Simple as that.
Yeah, because I bought myself some flowers and I like it, because I've got my pink shirt and I like it. It doesn't have to be a big thing, does it?
No,
it doesn't have to be a purchase either. It can simply be, 100%. One of the things that gives me the joy is sitting in my garden with a brew and just being.
Yeah. And some of these things are just visiting a place, and a lot of these places are free. it's just going to a garden or, these national gardens or something like this. And it's not all about spending loads of money, not at all. It's not like I've suddenly inherited the lottery and I've got all these free time. No, it's little things. And it's also sorting things out in your house that you just didn't have time to sort out, that it's just been annoying you. And so in my little book of book joy is a bloody checklist of stuff that I want to get done in the house and I want to get done in my life, just to kind of get those things done as well. So it's not all about just going off and gallivanting all over the place, not at all. But it's really put a really good boundary on myself and everything else. And I think a lot of women really do need that.
Thank you, Celia, for bringing me a little bit of joy this morning. It's been
thank you, Sarah. Really lovely to chat to you. Thank you.
As we button up another episode of It's Got Pockets, remember that just like that perfect dress with hidden storage, you've got pockets of potential. You can be exactly who you are meant to be with no one getting in your way, not even yourself. Just remember, you're not done yet. That plan B or plan C might be waiting for you. If you've enjoyed this episode and would like to work with me, or simply want to connect, come and find me at sarahknightconsultancy.co.uk or on LinkedIn, you'll find me as Nighty S. See you next time.